Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parents. In today's episode, mother is upset I use my first name in class. Woman is mad at her friends for not allowing her son to feed their calf. Grandfather demands I take care of him. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Mother is upset I use my first name in class. Obligatory. This happened about 2 years ago. I teach philosophy and epistemology to high schoolers. I'm also fairly young for a high school teacher. I introduce myself as Faye, my given first name, which has been my given name since birth, to my students. Well, I got an email from a parent reading, Lee Betancourt, this is Karen and I'm Kevin's mother. I'm deeply disturbed that you allow students to call you by your first name and believe this is unprofessional and confuses children. My child's test scores clearly reflect this, as your class is the only one he is struggling in, and, as he has maintained an outstanding academic performance, it is clear that you are the problem. I highly suggest that, in order to better teach my child, you reflect on this and begin to use your professional name. So I responded, Karen, thank you for reaching out to me. I'm awfully glad you are so concerned with your child's performance in my class. As you might not be aware, I do not grade homework or tests as official standing, and they go only to show an empiricist view of one's performance. Don't worry, this means the grade you see in this system will be different from the final grade, as your child will have a 100% in my class. This was made clear in my syllabus. You should also note that I attach my comments for every assignment and include an annotated copy of your child's exams and essays so that they may see where they need to improve. If you have specifics about concepts your child is struggling with and ways that might better help him learn these concepts, I'd be more than happy to meet with you over coffee or tea to discuss with you. So she responds, the annotations are incredibly vague and abstract and offer little insight into how my child, who is brilliant, may improve. However, I see you mark him wrong every time he refers to you as Lee Betancourt and replace it with Faye. It is illogical to ask of a child to indulge in using such a silly name. I highly advise you quit marking my child wrong for using your professional name in his essays. Likewise, I believe that as you are his teacher, you should use your professional name. So I decide to be petty and respond, thank you for your response. I appreciate how illogical and unsound your argumentation is, as this is a perfect example of Hume's law. I shall be using this to model in class examples of bad argumentation from now on. Thank you for the free class materials. I got a response back from her but didn't respond. LOL, the classical my child is brilliant, therefore, you are the problem because I cannot accept that my child is not that brilliant. This seems so weird to me. As a Norwegian, we pretty much only use surnames to avoid confusion, and even then it's often Jonas in accounting, not the Prime Minister. Yep. Even when we had 2 Christopher and 2 Stian and 2 Magnus in my class, they all still went by first name plus first letter of their last name. And as adults it's still the same. I have one colleague who occasionally refer to people by last name because he thinks it's cool, like sports stars use last name, but everyone else always use first name with everyone, including customers. Honestly, as a Canadian, this is weird to me too. We only ever called our teachers Mr/Mrs/MS/Miss, surname. Calling a teacher by their first name was seen as disrespectful, and most of the time we never knew their first names. Not as extreme as the other stories, or as I expected considering the ones we see in this subreddit, but I like how you basically made fun of her by setting her as bad example for the kids you teach. When people say a person should be an example for others, something that example is a negative one. LMAO. I actually had an education professional, a person who goes around teaching teachers, tell me the same thing. I explained with specific examples about how it's legitimate to use one's first name, and then he got angry, and it was entertaining to me but awkward in general for the rest of the meeting. Oh well. So, make Kevin call you Lee Betancourt, but let all the other pupils continue to use your first name. Oh, and obviously don't change Kevin's grades. Then see what his mother has to say. The brilliant child is a bit much, but are you actually marking a kid off for using your last name? My child is brilliant. Your child eats crayons and licks his desk. At 16 we don't even use crayons, he brings them in to eat. Woman is mad at her friends for not allowing her son to feed their calf. As someone involved in farming and agriculture, I'm in quite a few farm-related groups, and earlier this morning I came across this post. Went to visit some of my husband's friends in KY 9 hours away. Our small son enjoyed their farm. They had a bottle calf and would not let our 9-year-old help bottle feed it. Said their teenage son would feed it when he got home. Acted like it was a big deal and only their son could feed the calf. I've raised bottle calves throughout my life and I just didn't understand the reasoning with these folks. We are farm folks but don't have cows right now. I would let visitors feed anything I have and not even think about it. I'm always glad to introducing kids to AG. Just disappointed. Like, ma'am, your kid is not entitled to feed anyone else's animals just because you want him to experience it. No one needs to give you an explanation why your kid isn't allowed to do something with their property. And I can think of at least a dozen reasons why they wouldn't be okay with a child feeding an animal and instead want their own teenage son to feed it. Yikes. My parents have farmed for decades. There are a whole host of reasons why they wouldn't want some random kid to bottle feed their calf. What a weird thing to get hung up on. I have family on a farm, and I was never allowed to help with the cattle outside of making sure a gate was closed while moving them, when we visited. I didn't mind, because I preferred the sheep anyways. The amount of times I got trampled by orphan lambs at feeding time put me right off even trying to feed a calf. I would not be surprised if the friends ended their friendship with this entitled idiot. That particular calf might have been some type of 4-H or equivalent project which requires that son to 100% raise the calf. Also, she should learn that the plural of calf is calves, not calves. That's exactly what I thought and is the most likely reason why the person said the kid couldn't feed it. They probably made an agreement with their son and said it's purely his responsibility, and they're worried that letting someone else feed the calf even just once, it could turn into a regular thing if he decides he doesn't want to do it. I saw that and immediately doubted how much experience she had with calves or cows. My uncle had a baby elephant and only my cousin bottled fed her. We wouldn't have even asked to try and we were the same age. Yeah, I'm going to need you to explain the baby elephant thing, please. Why do I get the feeling that their precious baby is a hellion that the animals could not get away from fast enough? I've never been within 10 feet of a calf and I can think of 3 or 4 good reasons why. It's a safety concern, surely? Doesn't matter if the kid is from a farming background too, the boy is 9, the calf is bigger and it's likely used to being fed at particular times of the day by people it's familiar with. Grandfather demands I take care of him. Story time. My 19 at the time, narcissistic, alcoholic grandfather, 70 plus, who abused his wife and badmouthed all relatives and neighbors, never helping anyone when he was able-bodied, was caught in a tough position few years ago when grandma broke her hip and showed signs of amnesia while he himself was barely recovering from surgery. By this time, he had alienated everyone and only my mom put up with him, Father YK. During this time, I was home from break and visited him with my parents. During visit, he demanded I stay there and take care of them. Not request or ask, demand. When I politely refused, he yelled at me how I was ungrateful since he looked after me in my childhood. He yelled so much, I ended up crying. Now for some context, I was raised by my parents with help from my grandma, father's mother, 70 plus. She looked after me most of my life since my mom worked since I was 6 months old. Maternal grandparents has me for 5 days a year, because they begged to have me with them. I hated going there but was forced to. I stopped going when I was 15. Also note that whenever I stayed over, my mom used to slip him some money as well. The reason my mom can't help them is cause during this period my mom worked 6+ hours away and stayed near work. So my grandma, who lives with us, takes care of all the housework with help from dad. He is also working and works late. I wanted to help out my grandma during the break. At my breakdown my dad did confront him and told him to never speak like that to me again. But out of their earshot, dad believes I should care about them more. Anyway, after this incident I visited them like once and have NC with them. My mom understands this though my dad tries to get me to visit them more. But my relatives are making me out to be the AH for refusing to help and going NC. Do you have entitled grandparents too? And relatives who believe they should be served? You relatives are free to help your grandparent themselves. Thing is, they all look after their parents and had looked after their grandparents at one point or other. It's pretty much expected. Though none of their parents or grandparents were anywhere near as bad as this grandpa. Haha, the audacity of old people to demand their young relatives take care of them. TWLL, your parents you'll help for 5 days a year but at the caregiver cost of $500 a day. If those adult relatives want to throw verbal stones at a teenager, tell them they're more than welcome to help out the angry old man themselves. See how fast they find excuses to not do it. Maybe if they all chip in, they could put him in a nursing home. You should have seen how my late granddad would act the fool while he was still alive. He refused to work when he was younger, treated his wife and daughters like slaves, and acted as if he was the king of the universe. Fast forward several decades, his wife, my grandmother, had died. One of his daughters had died, another daughter lived in Florida and was no longer available to answer his demands. My female birth unit didn't have a driver's license so she could not immediately obey, and the only daughter left was living with him as his caretaker. He also refused to speak to anyone on the phone as that was beneath him. One night, after I had come home from work, the phone rang and it was Granddad in a panic. His caretaker had fallen and he was convinced her leg was broken. It was arranged to have her transported to the ER to get checked and I had to babysit him. He tried to treat me like his slave and I refused to tolerate his mess. He got a rude awakening. You're telling me this man has kids and they're trying to get the 19-year-old with their whole life ahead of them to take care of their parent? They should be ashamed of themselves. Putting off their duty on you. SMH. He has 2 kids. My mom and her brother. Grandpa mistreated his sons so much growing up, he hates them. He is settled elsewhere, and grandparents get a call from him in a year if they are lucky. Him and his family has gone completely NC with us. Relatives asking me are their extended family and my dad's side of the family. My dad's side especially are really kind and overall good people, so it doesn't make sense to them that I would be so cold towards my maternal grandparents. Maybe you can urinate on them bridges' ashes and then bury them deep. In this case it deserves being said to grandfather, if you were any sort of decent person, there would be people to help. You can point to the family members obviously not volunteering themselves and ask them when they plan on going over to help. I bet you're a girl. You don't say it but I'm convinced you're a girl. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share and we will see you in the next video.